This case was routine in many ways. The Illinois August was hot in 1992. A young woman was driving her brother back to school at Northwestern University north of Chicago. Even car problems of her white Pontiac hatchback seemed like a normal delay. The young woman driving was named Tammy Zywicki, and when the car started again, she managed to drop her brother at school. Tammy spent the night with a friend in Evanston, then headed on to Grinnell College in Iowa. There is usually a moment in any crime when life changes dramatically. Like a curtain in time, when everything that follows is tragic. On August 24th, 1992, police found the Pontiac and towed it off the interstate. From then on, things were definitely not routine. Tammy's parents reported her missing when they didn't get a phone call that night saying she arrived safely. When police connected the missing persons report to the abandoned Pontiac, they knew it was Tammy's, and the search for Tammy was on. On September 1st, Tammy's body was discovered alongside I-44 near Sarcoxie, Missouri. She'd been stabbed to death. The search went nationwide. The Missing Persons Division from Illinois and Missouri Homicide suspected Tammy had been killed elsewhere and left at exit 33 on I-44 in Missouri. A case like Tammy's never dies. It just goes cold. Until 34 years later, when a new group of investigators using persistence and new technology put fresh eyes on the investigation. Hello, I'm Bill Curtis with another episode from the files of the Illinois State Police. State Police. Things change in 34 years, and now for the first time publicly, there is a new profile, a person of interest, and investigators are revealing new details. It's another episode from the files of the Illinois State Police. Here's your host, Director Brendan Kelly.
All right, hello and welcome. This is Brendan Kelly, Director of the Illinois State Police. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that we have covered in a broader context previously, and that's the very difficult and sometimes frustrating and trying type of investigations that we call cold cases. And they're called cold cases because the trail has seemingly gone cold. But the reality is, with technology and with the persistence of the men and women of the Illinois State Police, and with the persistence of our partners from agencies like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in this day and age, no case is ever really truly cold. We don't give up. We keep fighting. We keep working. We keep following leads. We keep pulling on those strings because that's what the job requires. That's what the oath requires. That's what our duty requires. And there's one particular case, the case of Tammy Zywicki, which we're going to talk about today. And we have with us the Supervisor, Special Agent Dusty Gorley with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Chicago Field Office. Appreciate you joining us here today. And we have Acting Lieutenant Ryan Caney with our Violent Crimes Unit, also up in the north from the Illinois State Police. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here and talking about this case, which was very important to you. It's very important to everybody in the Illinois State Police. I know it's important to our host, Bill Curtis, who's very knowledgeable about this particular case. But before we get into it, let's just talk a little bit about the investigative challenges that you have generally with cases that have just gone unsolved for many years.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you certainly for just this opportunity to share Tammy's story. But one of the biggest challenges is simply the age of the case. Our agents, when we're working on something, we're not used to doing it. That's 34 years in the past. So that presents obstacles that a lot of our modern investigations don't face, like such as tools, technologies, and the techniques that didn't even exist back then in 1992. We were pretty much stuck with what we initially collected for physical evidence. And with a case this old, there's also going to be some transitions with the case agent. On the ISP side, we've had at least 6 ISP case agents over the years who have led this investigation, along with plenty of others assisting. But as agencies move on to different assignments or retire, you have a chance for those insights and experience to be lost.
What agent are you on this case?
I believe I'm number 4. So I took over the case in 2017 and then passed it off back in 2023.
But obviously have remained involved.
Correct. And so I know the original case agent, Bill Hamill, he had the longest. He had it over a decade. And he ended up passing away a couple years ago. But unfortunately, we never had the opportunity to connect on that. Another thing just to consider is the reporting systems that we've gone through. You go through, back in 92, everything's done on paper. It's literally on the typewriter.
Right.
And so as we go through that, there's going to have some transitions. You might have some different things that would be lost potentially when you're converting those systems together. And so we've now brought this case into the modern age. We can then use such tools such as AI to assist us, or potentially keyword searches, even just going through the
go
case
through
file.
all these old different records
Exactly.
from different records management systems, some that were paper, some that were converted into digital files, some that have been transitioned from one type of computer system or the other over the decades. Or, I mean, sometimes it's like year to year we're updating systems and things
Correct.
have to be transitioned over. And with AI, you're able to search all this data and cue in on significant words related to the case.
Correct. And so then we also have our partners with the FBI, that there's some transition. So again, just that communication, but it is that chance to have some things that go out of mind, out of sight, and lose that experience. Also, one thing we were looking through, a difficulty that we had this last year was in the evidence management system. When back in 92, those bytes were at a premium. Developers literally would try to condense your fields that you could enter. So you might only be able to enter 10 characters or so in a tab. One of our exhibits was basically labeled hair stem, 2 centimeters remaining. So when we were looking and kind of reviewing this evidence, we thought, well, we just have a little fraction of a hair. Well, it turns out once we went into that and opened the evidence in a sterile lab setting, we found that there were many more hairs that we could potentially use and uncover. And so that's just kind of one little snippet of things that you would face when you're working with systems that were
limitations of the records
Absolutely.
management system. And obviously, we train our people to write good, thorough reports to include as many details as possible, because sometimes these things do need to be handed off and you need to have a good record that you can refer to. But the reality is that the work that law enforcement does, particularly a special agent working on a case, some of that may be in subtle nuances and aspects of the case that maybe are not written down, but are almost like a oral tradition passed off from one special agent to the other, whoever may be working the case. Sometimes that's passed along very effectively in a proper transition, but we also know that doesn't always take place, and sometimes people change jobs very, very quickly. So, in addition, obviously you talked about one of the agents who worked on this case is now deceased.
correct.
And that's obviously true for witnesses in any cold case. But, I can recall cases that go back 50, 60 years sometimes where the key witnesses that may have known the most are no longer on this earth. And so being able to use their testimony and the evidence that they had is sometimes very, very difficult.
I said there's certainly an emotional challenge to a case like this. Working with Tammy's family, you talk to them on almost a monthly basis, checking in. When you get a breakthrough in the case, you're excited to share that with them. You develop these relationships, both even with FBI agents over the years. And so there's a highs and lows to this. There's certainly just different challenges. But, I remember when I first started with the case, we were doing a press release for the 25th year anniversary. And we were looking at this case, hey, we're excited. We're pushing the envelope here. And then now here we are almost 10 years later now. We'll celebrate the 34-year anniversary here this year. And we're getting closer, but the case remains open. Job's not done yet.
Still working it, and still working it with, luckily, our federal partners involved as well. So, Special Agent Gorley, how do our agencies work together, the Illinois State Police and the FBI. We work on so many different things, obviously, but how do we work together on these type of cases? We have new cases coming in all day, every day that are hot, literally happened seconds or minutes ago. You guys are running and gunning, chasing down all kinds of threats to public safety, from terrorism to cybercrime, and not to mention violent crime. How do we maintain those partnerships and keep working on these cases literally over the years and decades?
Well, first of all, I want to start out by saying thank you for having me. It's a privilege to represent the FBI Chicago Field Office, to represent this partnership that we value so much between the FBI and the state police, but also just to highlight this case. This case is incredibly important to both our agencies, our organizations, and just to bring any information or highlight or more attention to this case is incredibly important. Challenges, of course, I think the FBI, like ISP, I think every agency you would ask would say, hey, we're understaffed. We have these new crime trends. We're addressing these new cases. We have new cases to address, but it's easy to be passionate about this case and to make it a priority. I think when you think about what Ryan said, he's built a relationship with the family. It's important to give them updates, to have empathy if they're going through, they lost a loved one, but more importantly, they don't know what happened. I think the lack of information and the lack of knowledge of knowing what happened is almost as bad as losing one. I think, we owe it to them to give it everything we have. We owe it to them to give it everything we possibly can. It's one of those cases, and I think Ryan would echo what I say, is that you wake up and you think about this case, and it's the last thing you think about before you go to bed.
So that to your point, it's been 34 years since Tammy disappeared, and some people might say, give it up already, or it's a waste of time. Why keep the case open, right? Why keep after it? Why keep after it?
Well, we don't ever give up. That mentality never enters the equation. It's part of our ethos. As officers, we took an oath of the office to discharge our duties of an officer to the very best of our abilities. We will continue with our partners in the FBI to pursue every lead, revisit evidence as new technology develops, and remain committed to bringing justice for Tammy, her family, and friends. Let me just tell you a little bit about Tammy. Tammy was kind of an all-American girl. She's about 21 years old, getting ready to start at Grinnell College in Iowa. She's actually going back there just for a brief moment to do some yearbook activities. Then she's going to come back to Chicago and start this fall internship at the Art Institute in Chicago. Tammy was an avid photographer, yearbook staff member, youngest daughter of 4 children, and the only daughter, and really came from a stable and supportive family. Very loving family. It's been an honor to meet the Zwickis over the years.
So this is a real person. This is not just an abstraction, and this is not just a number or a name on a case file. This is something that you've gotten to know very well, and you got to know that family very well, and I guess I'm assuming, and you tell me, that seems like the greatest motivator, that you are just continuing to run down new leads and look at evidence and turn it over and get a different perspective repeatedly, and then apply new technology to it, really for their family. The Illinois State Police are values, our integrity, service, and pride, and that's the ISP. That's where that comes from, and it's a good motto, but it's also what we really are. But I will say that the P doesn't always just stand for pride. It also stands for persistence, just staying after it, never giving up, and continuing to try to pursue justice for people like Tammy and her family and her friends. But let's get into it. Like, what do we know at this point?
Well, we know Tammy left Chicago approximately around noon on Sunday, August 23rd. We think she left, kind of went down on 294 towards Morris, Illinois. We know we were able to recover a receipt from Hardee's, which she made a stop in Morris around 2 p.m. And then we know her vehicle broke down roughly 30 miles west of Morris on I-80. So we're roughly looking at a time frame, say approximately 2:30, maybe 3 o'clock, when she experiences some type of car problems. Not quite sure. I know her brother reported that they had some type of car problem the day before. We know it was the middle of a Midwest heat wave, and You've got the heat, humidity, and multiple vehicles are breaking down at that time. At about 5:05, we know a trooper tagged the car as abandoned on I-80 at milepost 83 near Utica and ended up being towed the next day. It doesn't necessarily appear that our suspect planned any of this ahead of time or targeted Tammy in any way. It was clearly a crime of opportunity. Our suspect saw this young woman broken down on the side of the road, pulled over, and ultimately gained and then betrayed her trust. Tammy's car was locked, neatly organized, and it appears that she took her most valuable possessions with her. She's out there in distress, but in full view of the public, with cars whizzing by at highway speeds. So whoever stopped had the ability to appear genuine to her and convince her to willingly go with him, leaving her car and most of her belongings there.
So no signs of a struggle at the car.
Correct. We have about 37 witnesses who called in, made reports through the various tip lines, who reported either seeing Tammy's car broken down or saw a vehicle stopping there to help her. Eyewitness testimony varies widely. Some saw a van, others a pickup, others semis. Descriptions of the driver differ significantly. People record and process the same event differently and then recall those memories over a period of time.
And that's not that unusual.
Not at all.
Many different perspectives, and they put bits and pieces together, and you may have a little bit of inconsistency, but maybe some common threads, some different perspectives. That famous movie that a lot of law enforcement talks about, Rashomon, where it's the same terrible thing that happens, but seen from different perspectives, and people aren't lying; they're just seeing from a different point of view.
They're just
and
processing it differently.
Slight inconsistencies. Yeah, they may have been going by at 80 miles an hour, and so they're viewing it differently than someone who might have been just walking down the street. So that's not unusual. So she leaves New Jersey. She has car problems. We have an abandoned vehicle. There's a missing person report and a search. And then where does it go from there?
Well, one complicating factor, too, with these eyewitness reports is we have another young woman who experienced car trouble, just like Tammy, just 2 miles east of Tammy that same afternoon. Similar build. Her cars are similar sedans, just like Tammy's white Pontiac. A Good Samaritan stopped to help her. She get back on the road, and then she ends up turning to be one of our witnesses who called in and reported saying, hey, I saw Tammy's car. It was just a mile down the road. It was locked. Nobody was there. Looked abandoned to me. So clearly, a Good Samaritan stopped, helped her. She got to go home that night. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for Tammy.
So just another motorist having car trouble, and that could actually cause some of the confusion by some of the witnesses. So you got to parse through all that and figure all that out.
Absolutely. So several days go by. Family and friends start to pour in. Some traveling great distances just to help organize the search. Really, the community did turn out here. Flyers get passed out, but something's clearly not right. Why wouldn't she call? Where could she have gone? She has no motivation to run away, do anything. She's got a very stable home life, stable environment there. But unfortunately, 8 days later, on September 1st, Missouri Highway Patrol finds an unidentified female body, and it ends up being Tammy.
So then the case begins from there. And in this case, we have a deceased person. Did a coroner, did anybody ever determine that it was a homicide?
Did do an autopsy that next day, and yes, she was found to be stabbed 8 times in the chest area. She's found about 500 miles from the kidnapping site, or where her car broke down, on I-44, milepost 33. Actually, I had the chance to visit that site a couple years ago as my family was traveling through the area. Back in 1992, and even to this day, it's a fairly remote area. You've got farms, pastures, rolling hills. It's beautiful country. But I-44 is also a major trucking route between the Southwest and the Midwest. And her body was just only thrown a few feet off the ramp. There are a couple of buildings on the other side of the interstate, on the south side, but nothing on the north side where she was left. It's very easy to see why her body was left there.
Again, for people who are listening, where in Illinois is this? What interstate is this? Because obviously one of the reasons we're doing this podcast, in case anybody's listening, it might jog somebody's memory. You might get a new lead out of it. So just kind of refresh our recollection on exactly where this is.
So Her car broke down on I-80 at milepost 83. That's right near LaSalle area and Utica exit. If you ever go out to Starved Rock, that's right where her car was abandoned. Again, 8 days later, now her body is found over in Missouri, southwest Missouri, on I-44. Again, it's about halfway between Springfield and Joplin. Again, very, very rural area, remote. There's going to be little to no traffic at night, especially. There's not going to be any exterior lights illuminating her, just mostly cows in a pasture and some crickets chirping in the summer night. There's no attempt to bury her or hinder her identification. She's simply discarded and left for someone to find.
So, an abandoned car. Obviously, that vehicle was searched. And then you have Tammy's remains, and obviously those were that evidence was explored and documented. But from what I understand, there were some personal items of Tammy's that should have been there based upon the information and based upon the initial investigation. But those items are missing. What were the items that were missing from Tammy?
Well, again, when she locks up her car, we think she has every intention of coming back. So she does leave a lot of her items there. She left some clothing, she left one of her cameras, and everything's neat and orderly. It's not like there's any type of robbery motive. So we know that she took several things, such as her wallet, ID, her purse, her main camera.
And she took those because those aren't in the car.
Those are not in the car, no. But again, when we recover her body, there's just basically left with clothing on her. There's no identification on her.
No wallet on her.
No wallet.
License. Okay.
And we do notice that there are a few things that are missing when they start to compare the notes. In particular, there's a little Loris wristwatch with a green band. She's seen in many pictures wearing it, so it was one of her favorite watches. And it plays a musical tune, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head.
And that's not on her body.
That's missing. Yes, the watch was a limited run, only a few thousand made that we best can tell through our research. Tammy was also enjoyed playing soccer. Very good athlete. In fact, her old high school, Eastside High in Taylor, South Carolina, hosts a memorial soccer match now annually to honor her. She had a patch that she had sewn on her shorts. It was a soccer club that she belonged to. And it was the letters are St. Giles Soccer Club, Greenville, South Carolina, and white and red lettering. And we also do have a replica photo available, but that patch was really roughly cut off her shorts.
Okay, so explain that.
So typically what we think, there's no motive there for sale. There's no monetary value on this watch or this patch. We think that those were taken by our suspect for an emotional value, right? If they get a chance to relive the moment, whatever reason they're doing this for, they're taking that as a memento.
So she has a pretty unique watch that people know that she regularly wore, and that watch plays a song. Is that right? And what is that song?
It's Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head.
Okay. And that's missing from her body when her body's found.
Correct.
And there is a patch, some kind of patch that those around her friends, family knew was on her
shorts that she wore soccer. It meant something to her.
So on her soccer shorts, a patch. What kind of patch was it?
It was just a circular red and white patch, and it said St. Giles Soccer Club.
And that was missing, though, from her remains.
Correct. And it was very crudely and roughly cut off.
Perhaps some type of trophy collected from the...
Absolutely. That's our best
by the killer.
Right down at this point.
Because they don't have any other resale value. There's no real monetary value. So it's not just a straight-up robbery. There's some specific reason to take those.
And we know she was missing her shoes. Clearly, I think if somebody was a captive, that would be one of the first things that you would take off and remove. So she was missing her shoes as well.
And that would have made it harder for her to get away, I suppose.
Correct.
Well, let's talk more about the additional evidence, particularly the kind of crime scene forensics that I think most people know about, that law enforcement uses. The fingerprints, clothing, DNA, etc. How have those things been looked into and investigated over the years, and where are we now with them?
Well, just to mention the fingerprints, obviously when all we have is her recovered missing car, that's really what they focused on early on. Is how can we process this car? Certainly we thought maybe somebody might have touched it. We ended up covering about 8 partial fingerprints off that vehicle. One was later attributed to her father, Hank. Zywicki. Even to this day, 34 years later, we've never been able to match those partial prints to anyone using our databases.
So it makes sense her father's fingerprints would be on there, probably working on her car or touched her
Absolutely.
car, helping her in some way, but when she left from home. But there's other fingerprints that have not been able to be matched.
Correct. So we continually to update those and to reapproach those, see if there's perhaps something that's new that's contributed. But a lot of the technology too, even with fingerprints, is working on better matches, etc.
What about good old DNA?
We've been focusing a lot of our time here on DNA recently. This is one of the fields I think that gives us the most promise and has been just rapidly expanding in capabilities. The FBI partnership in this case really has benefited the investigation. We would not be here today if this is not a joint investigation. And this is kind of unusual to have both the FBI and a state agency working jointly together on this. And so many thanks to them for their partnership. They've brought us resources. They brought us experts in the field. They've made connections for us. And really the ability to reach nationally across the country. We've sent leads out to the West Coast, to the East Coast, all over. And we would not be here. I don't think you'd approve the budget for ISP agents to travel all over the country like that.
I might. It depends.
So thank you to the FBI for being a partnership here. So through that collaboration, we started exploring what private labs could do for us testing-wise that our state and FBI labs were simply not equipped to do. We started this renewed focus back in 2018 and still continues to this day. We conducted a thorough review of all our potential evidence and observed some discrepancies that have helped us, such as the mislabeled evidence that I mentioned earlier with the hair. It took us and our fellow agents at SBI looking through every detail, combing through everything, discussing every possibility. Sometimes we catch a break and we found more to test. Other instances, we open up evidence and simply had been consumed in prior tests.
When you say it's been consumed, that for people that are listening that may not be familiar with how DNA is analyzed, when you go through the chemical process of analyzing a particular piece of physical evidence, that essentially consumes that physical piece of evidence. Just the virtue of testing it, like you're testing a hair, you're testing blood. The hair doesn't necessarily remain, or the bodily fluid, or the blood necessarily remains because it's been changed and altered by virtue of the DNA analysis. So you don't get a second bite at the apple at some of these.
Correct.
These
we
DNA
get one
things.
shot.
Yep. And some of those things have been consumed, but as you've gone through evidence, you've found other things that are possible to test, and without really giving away any secrets here, because this is an ongoing investigation, and some progress has been made, and some leads have been developed. Based upon what we know, what kind of person generally are we looking for here in terms of the offender's profile?
Well, we do believe that we have a Caucasian male based on some of our testing that we've been able to occur. I'm pleased to announce that we do think we have our suspect's profile. He is on multiple pieces of key evidence that we've recovered. And clearly evidence that he would have had to manipulate when he disposed of her body.
And evidence that was not able to be tested and analyzed in this particular way, perhaps when this first occurred. But with new technology, things we're able to analyze now have yielded some more encouraging results.
Correct. Even when we started testing back in 2018 with this renewed focus, stuff that we can do now, we couldn't do back then. So we also have to weigh the pros and cons of, we only have so much evidence. Do I want to use that now, try to seek justice for Tammy when our suspect potentially still might be alive? Or do we hold off and let a few more years develop, et cetera? So,
waiting for the technology to develop further.
So we do believe it's a male Caucasian. What we are looking for is possibly brown-haired male at this time. We believe, just due to the geographical location, and then something I'll get into a little bit more, but we do believe that there's a possible tie to a trucking industry. Could have been an over-the-road trucker at some point. Possible ties to the Southern California. He's probably going to have a history of domestic violence or sexual abuse. But he's also going to be able to converse with people, right? He convinced and persuaded Tammy to go willingly with him and leave most of her belongings.
Right.
So he's going to have that charisma. And he also is going to have that ability at that time to overpower her either physically or even psychologically. He could have been playing a mental game with her.
And how big was Tammy? How big or small was she?
Again, as she was a smaller build, athletic, definitely an attractive 21-year-old senior. It could have been, my daughter. My daughters are getting ready to go to school here pretty soon. And so really it could be anybody's daughter.
So Special Agent Gorley, this is obviously a joint investigation, and many FBI investigations are. And we have many of our task force officers that work with the FBI and have great partnerships on a whole host of different fronts. But in this particular investigation, if you could share a little bit with everyone about how the FBI and the Illinois State Police have collaborated to sift through this information and new evidence and develop new leads.
I'm glad you mentioned task forces. We value our task forces so much, and it's the lifeblood of federal law enforcement is our relationships with our local partners, local and state partners. I think the office has 20 to 30 different task forces through FBI Chicago. This particular case is a little more of an informal relationship. I know Ron alluded to the fact that we've had a lot of turnover of case agents as our investigators as the years have gone on.
Yeah, you think we have a lot of turnover. You guys are moving constantly.
I think since I got in the Bureau in 2012, we're on our 5th or 6th agent that has investigated this case. So continuity is incredibly important. The institutional knowledge of passing on from one investigator to the next. I know this is easy because I know every agent that's been on it from the FBI maintains an interest, maintains an investigative interest, and stays involved in some capacity, no matter if they've retired or they've moved on to different offices. But for now, when the agent that works for the FBI and works for the ISP now, that's daily communication. That's daily talks of, hey, we got this tip in, we got this lead, or it can be, hey, what do we try this? A little bit of a brainstorming, but this is daily, weekly communication between us. And that's the biggest thing is relationships, that we work together well. Another aspect of that is training and development. As every day a new technology comes out, a new possibility of something that we can apply to this case. So it's on us as investigators, and we brainstorm together and we work together on, hey, let's learn a little bit more about this. Maybe we can apply it to this case. Or hey, let's review this type of evidence. Maybe this certain DNA analysis can work for this. Maybe this different fingerprint analysis can work. So it's just daily, weekly communication.
Yeah, and let's go into this. So when we're working together, we're collaborating. We were able to get some success through that collaboration. Back in 2023, with our partners in the FBI, we were able to identify one particular female profile. We know it's not Tammy. And then through that collaboration, working through the experts in the field, we were able to submit that to another private lab, and they were able to give us an identification of this profile. So this is our biggest breakthrough to date. We don't have any indication that this female was directly involved, but her story really is a second tragedy that, if you don't mind, I'd like to go into.
Yeah, please, explain how this ties into Tammy.
So we know that this profile was taken off her blanket. So she's in our crime scene, per se. We don't know necessarily when or if she was directly involved, but at some point she had some type of contact with our suspect prior to Tammy's demise. She was identified through DNA left in the blanket that Tammy was found wrapped in. Her name is Teresa Vega. She was born in Southern California in 1959, youngest of 6 children. She often went by the name of Terry, according to her family, which we went and interviewed with the FBI's assistants. Teresa was 12 years older than Tammy and faced lots of difficulties and hardships, really a stark contrast to Tammy's upbringing. In her teenage years, she ended up running away from home. She had a thing to fall in love with Marines and got married young, and then had several children early on. In fact, she had 6 children by the time she reached the age of 24. She may have struggled with mental illness and ended up leaving her children and their fathers with very little contact with them during the rest of their lifetime. Teresa was involved in multiple toxic relationships and had difficulty maintaining any type of positive relationship or any type of connection to a support system. But a pattern of life here starts to emerge in her life for whatever reason. She frequently chose to move away and keep distance from family members, leaving spouses, leaving children. Perhaps it was a defense mechanism. Perhaps it was just mental illness. But again, a big contrast to Tammy's life growing up. Lots of instability. Risk factors here were present both by choice and not by choice. We don't always get to choose the deck of cards, right, that we're dealt. Later on, Teresa, in her late teens and early 20s, was mostly located around San Diego and the Camp Pendleton area. We know she listed residences in Oceanside and Vista, California. And several years later, she got briefly married to a man named John Belinsky in 1987 and ended up taking the last name of Belinsky for the rest of her life. FBI and both ISP went out and interviewed John. He cooperated fully with us. We don't believe he was involved in any way. But she left him after a couple months, and this is where our investigation starts to grow cold and where we'd like to appeal to the public to help. We knew that Teresa had ties in the Fontana and San Bernardino area in the early 90s and out in California around the time Tammy was murdered. Some of her family related that she liked to hitchhike or travel all over the country with over-the-road truck drivers. Sometimes these weren't the best relationships, but she kept to herself and would only check in with family every couple years. She'd call if she was in town, say, hey, can we meet up? She'd meet for the day and then disappear again for years at a time. A couple months after Tammy was murdered in October of 2023, or October of 1992, she met her oldest daughter, who wanted to introduce her to her first grandchild. Her daughter had traveled all the way from Missouri to San Bernardino to visit Teresa, but again, Teresa chose to put up walls and chose to vanish. Teresa had some contact with police during the 90s, but was never arrested during this time frame from our research. We've been able to confirm that she was traveling around the U.S. We don't know if she was on the road all the time or just here and there. She didn't have a means to travel on her own, so she was with somebody during that time. We simply don't know. Teresa ended up settling down in the Phoenix area and then reconciled with one of her brothers towards the end of her life before she passed away in poor health in 2014. Sadly, that's before we even knew she was a piece of this puzzle. All we know is at some point that she likely had some type of contact with our suspect prior to Tammy's death.
So the blanket that was found on the remains of Tammy, we've surmised at this point, for whatever reason, that was not her blanket.
Correct. We believe that was possibly in the back of a semi-truck, could have been a blanket that we picked up. I believe we've tracked down that it was made by the manufacturer, typically sold something you go to Walmart to be able to purchase.
But this blanket that Tammy was wrapped in, likely by the suspect, was a piece of evidence that had DNA from Teresa.
Correct.
So the blanket that is found on Tammy was at some point used by Teresa.
Correct.
Likely while she was with whoever our suspect is.
That's what our best indication is right now.
At some point. Okay. Very interesting. Fascinating. And that is a tragic life and obviously very different than Tammy's life. But for anybody listening that may know anything about Teresa Vega or cross paths with her at any time, certainly that's information that could be helpful to law enforcement to help to put the pieces of the puzzle together even further. This case and the circumstances surrounding this case, Special Agent Gorley, I don't know if you have kids. I've got 2 boys, and my oldest has graduated from college and is working now, but my youngest is still finishing up college. And literally last week, he just got in his truck and headed back to school. 5 hours away from where we live. Many of us send our kids off to college, and they hit the road, and just like Tammy was going into her senior year, my son's going into his senior year, and you hope that their whole lives are ahead of them, and that they're going to get safely from point A to point B. And now in this day and age, we have things like Life 360 and other apps, where we stalked our kids and keep
the overbearing parents.
Yes, the helicopter parents. We say we're not worried, but really we always are, and that's because terrible things like this can happen. How can from your perspective at the FBI level, and then Ryan from your perspective, how can the public help bring some sort of closure to the family and friends of Tammy Zywicki?
You said that story. It reminds me of kind of a family story. I went to college like 3 hours away from where I grew up, and my mom would call me no less than 12 to 15 times in that 3-hour span of where I went from left home to where I got to college. So I can only imagine how she would have felt if something like this would have happened. As law enforcement officers, we're at our best whenever we're working together hand in hand with the public. And in this particular instance, we need help. We need anything that you might have seen or remember. There's nothing too small or too old, or even if you're not sure if it's relevant, please call in. Please just let us know. Anything and everything can help us put all these pieces to the puzzle together. And in this case, we're going to all look ourselves in the mirror at some point in time to make sure that we did everything possible to solve this case. And I hope that you feel how passionate we are about this and we want to solve it, and we're looking for your help. Anything would be beneficial. So thank you for considering that.
Thank you. We're glad to do it. It's important to the entire Illinois State Police. And I appreciate that, the things you touched on there, things that we could use the public's help with. But Caney, anything we're missing? We've obviously covered a lot. You've been very thorough. I think we're providing some more information that maybe has not yet been available to the public at this point, and it helps us people to know there's a picture developing here. We obviously can't discuss everything because this is still an ongoing criminal investigation. But anything we haven't touched upon that you think would be important for people to hear and know?
Again, this is the news about Teresa Vega. This is brand new. This is the first time that this is being released through this podcast. So again, we're looking for people. Why you'd say, well, what are the chances of somebody remembering 30 years ago all this Teresa? So we are going to include a picture. We have used some AI generation, a new tool to age regress a possible photo of what she may have looked like in 1992. So anybody, you probably went by the name of Terry Belinsky at that time. If you have any ties to Southern California or even just in the trucking industry, would you like to travel around between 80s, early 90s? That's where we're kind of looking to just fill in more pieces about Teresa's life. Acquaintances or partners that she might have kept completely separate from family. We've interviewed all her family members at this point, and we're really looking for further assistance, or whatever people can provide. Some cities that are connected to her include Oceanside, Vista, Pomona, San Bernardino, and Fontana, California.
Those are all California, right?
Correct. Again, we'll include a photo of Teresa, and then we just want to know what was more about her, where she was in the 90s, who she was with, etc. And once we start to get all these pieces put together, the larger picture then starts to come into focus. Also, if you know somebody who might fit our male suspect, please submit a tip. You can go to both the FBI page and our ISP investigative crime tip page that will be linked here on our website, and we'll have the photos of both the patch, the watch, photos of Teresa, and also, if there's anything like our FBI girlie said, our agent girlie said, you've got to be able to say something. We can't work with something if you choose to be silent. So no matter what you think, big, small, all it takes is one person to say something. And we see in the news, I know ISB had a recent successful close to a 40-year-old cold case recently. And so it's our job to continue to share and keeps Tammy's story and memory alive. There's also a Facebook following called Who Killed Tammy Zywicki. If you want to learn more, that's another public resource that has proved very beneficial in providing tips to us. And again, keeping her memory alive is the biggest thing that we can do.
Well, I thank both of you, Acting Lieutenant Ryan Caney and Special Agent Gorley from the FBI. I thank both of you for spending this time with us here on our podcast, talking about not just cold cases broadly, but this one in particular. This is important to the Illinois State Police. It's important to the FBI. It's important to our host, Bill Curtis, who has a history with this case and has followed it for many years as well. And it's obviously important to the family of Tammy Zywicki. A photograph, as Acting Lieutenant Caney said, a photograph of Tammy Zywicki and sample photos of some of the items investigators are looking for will be available on the Illinois State Police website and on our social media pages. We are also including a picture of Teresa Vega, who is someone who has passed away, but for anyone that may have known her or encountered her, they may know something about her that could be very relevant to the resolution of this case. And we will have that a picture of her on our investigative tips page. Anyone with information in this case may submit a crime tip by going to the Illinois State Police homepage, isp.illinois.gov, and you can find the button in on our quick links. Again, thank you to everyone who has continued to work on this case. It is very important that we try to have some justice, whatever measure of justice is possible, and for people to understand that the long arm of the law is not limited by time. This is a case that does not have a statute of limitations. This is a murder case. And so our ability to pursue justice never ends until the case is solved. And I know that is consistent with the values of the FBI, of fidelity, bravery, and integrity, and certainly consistent with the values of the Illinois State Police: integrity, service, and pride, and that other P, which is persistence. And so I appreciate you both continuing to persist, and everyone that has worked on this case continuing to be persistent to try to get justice for Tammy Zywicki. So, gentlemen, I thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
As we close this file, troopers will be ready to help with your questions. Do you remember Tammy Zywicki? Police would like to know. Any information could be the piece of the puzzle that finally leads to justice for a young woman lost forever at the side of the highway on her way to school. Contact the Illinois State Police. Thank you. State Police is recorded and edited by Sam Rusink. Original theme music composed by David Huizinga. Produced by Trooper Tammy Wellborn. Remember, good